Okay, everyone. So this will be the second part of the week one online lecture that you'll need to listen to. And here we're going to go over like some basic economic concepts, supply and demand, review that, talk about elasticities. This is how buyers and sellers respond to changes in the price level, how sensitive they are to like any types of change in the price level. And then marginal analysis, which is really important. This is the way, like, just if you're a manager, you decide like whether your company needs to produce more or less of a good, like you look at it on the margin, like, will this increase my profit here by producing one more unit, or will it decrease it? Right? You're not going to look at the total profit like, oh, I've got a positive profit, that's good. No, you want to look at what will make it an additional unit or decreasing by additional. You want to see what that does. And that's how you can find what will actually maximize your profit. Okay, so let's make this full view. Let's see. All right. Okay. All right. So here, now I'm going to draw this out because I think it's a little bit better to see it, draw it out and go through it. But you'll have this to look back in your notes. I have this on Brightspace. But so let's flick over to my little whiteboard here where I can draw this out. And share. Desktop 2. There we go. Well, I thought I had it. Okay. All right. Hopefully this is sharing. Okay. All right, so we're looking in the market for a particular good. And so on the y-axis, we'll have the price level, the price per unit of a good. Then on the x-axis, well, this is going to be the quantity of a good. Okay. This is the price per unit. Okay. Now the first part, this is from the the consumer point of view. This is what they make up what's known as demand. And so demand is downward sloping. All right. So the law of demand states that as the price of a good decreases, right, ceteris paribus, everything else remains the same. Well, then the amount of quantity demand is going to increase if this price lowers. Okay. Now, if the price increases, the quantity demand is going to decrease. And once this makes sense, because as the price of a good becomes more expensive, or you're going to be less likely to buy it, or you're going to buy less of it. So that's going to influence it and cause the quantity demand to adjust accordingly. All right. Well, what about supply? And this comes from the producers. Well, supply is actually upward sloping. Okay. Supply is going to be upward sloping. And so the law of supply states as the price of a good increases, well, if everything else remains the same, well, then the quantity of supply is going to increase. So there's going to be a positive relationship with the price when you look at supply. And this makes sense too. Like if you could sell the good for more, generate more revenue for it and sell for a higher price, what's going to increase your profits? You're going to be more likely to produce more of it. And therefore the supply is going to increase as a result of that. Right? So both of these make sense. Same way as if the price falls, you're going to generate less revenue. Well, it's not going to be profitable for you. So for some people now, they're going to quit producing, or you may produce less of it. Right? Now, let's talk about the equilibrium price here. The equilibrium price is what brings the quantity supply and quantity demand to equilibrium to each other. You can call this the equilibrium price or the market clearing price. The market clears. There's no surplus or shortage here. All right. Of course, this will be our equilibrium quantity. This is when the price gets to where quantity supply and quantity demand are equal to each other, and then it'll form, equilibrium quantity, and that's what's actually sold out on the market. Okay. All right. So let's go back to our slides. There we go. Okay. All right. Well, there we go. All right, so let's look at the demand, what all goes into it. So we talked about, how the price affects it, but there's other things that, this is when we talk about ceteris paribus, when we're saying that all these other things must remain the same. Well, then if the price goes up, your quantity demand will increase or decrease depending on where you look at supply or demand. But here, these are all the different things that go into demand here. All right, besides the price. The price is, the most important. It's what changes. It's what's going to have the biggest effect on it for the most part. But there's a lot of other things that go into this as well. Here we're looking at, the quantity demanded for a Toyota Prius or Chevy Volt, kind of one of these, some electric car. It gets really good gas mileage, or doesn't use any gas at all. So I'm not sure if these have a hybrid or if they don't use gas at all. But anyway, the Volt may not, yeah. So obviously the price is important. But what's also important? Well, price of substitute goods. All right. So these are cars that are very similar here, like the Accord or the Cruise. Right. So these are cars that you can, similar price level. They both get really good gas mileage. Right. And these are something you can buy for, buy in place of it. So the price of these goods will actually affect the quantity demand of these of the Toyota Prius and Chevrolet Volt. Complementary goods. All right. So I guess one of the things that has to go with these is replacement batteries. Right. So if the price of these replacement batteries increases, well, that's going to, maybe you're less likely to buy one of these now because the price of it rose. Or if it goes down, the price of these batteries goes down, well, maybe you're more likely to buy it. So that'll increase the demand for these electric cars. Yeah. So let me try to, what's a better example? Like, so, going away from the cars, like a good example of complementary goods is like chips and dip. All right, they go together. So obviously, if the price of one increases, it's going to affect the demand for the other good because people are going to buy less of the chips. Well, one of the things that goes with them is the dip. So you're going to buy less of the dip as well. Okay. So those are how those affect each other. Income of consumers. Obviously, with more income, the demand is going to increase for most goods. Right? And if your income decreases for consumers, well, they're going to have less money, and so the demand is going to decrease for goods. How much you spend on advertising and promotion? Well, that's going to, obviously, the more you spend on it, it's going to more people know about it, and it's going to increase the demand. And if less is spent on it, well, that's going to cause it to decrease. How much competitors spend on advertising and promotion? That's going to affect it as well. If more people know about these other options, well, they're going to be less likely to buy your car, and that's going to affect it. The size of the potential target market. How many, the size of the market that wants to buy this particular good, that's obviously going to impact the demand. Consumers' taste and preferences. For here, it's going to be like, their preference for like a greener type of transportation. How important is that to them, their taste here? Like, if they're really more concerned about doing that, well, that's going to increase the demand of it. If they don't really care, and maybe like, well, maybe there's some other better option. This type of transportation is not really as green as I thought, or maybe there's something a lot better. Well, that's going to impact it as well too. Appreciation or depreciation of these hybrid autos. So if you expect the price of these cars to get more expensive in the future, well, you're more likely to buy it now, so demand will increase. But if you expect them to decrease and get cheaper as they become more, maybe you think, well, in a few years from now, they're going to be able to produce these cars cheaper, prices go down. Well, you'll wait for it, so demand will decrease. Okay. Tax is also affected. This is a big thing. A lot of people bought these cars, so they got a big, they got a big tax subsidy that paid for a good portion of it. So that increased the demand greatly. So if they take this away, I think they have, like this will, impact it and cause a decrease on these types of cars. All right. And so what I just talked about, these are, any type of change in these things other than the price, these cause a shift in the demand curve and cause, an increase or decrease in demand. All right. So here they're talking about the changes in the changes of gas prices here, because this is a complement to driving a car. It's like you need to you have to buy gas to go with it to use it. So as the gasoline price got more expensive, well, that decreased the demand for these big vehicles that use a lot of gas. So as you can see, it started out when gas was $2 a gallon. Ford sold over 400,000 Ford Explorers. It's one of their big SUVs. But then gas price increased to $350. Well, they sold a lot less now, all right? Because this complementary good that goes with these gas vehicles, it increased a lot, so it decreased the demand. This shift the whole demand shows. So the demand schedule, this is just like the actual, how much demand at each price is. The supply curve is just like the graphical representation of this demands. The demand curve is just a graphical representation of the demand schedule, basically. And then the gas price increased all the way to 4 in 2008. And so then it causes the Explorers, the market just like basically implode, like I only sold 30,000. And so they withdrew it from the market. Right? And so this shows how like these complementary goods can really impact it and shift the demand for these types of goods. All right, there's a graphical representation of it. Now the supply function. We'll talk about some of the things that go into determining that. Right. So the supply, of course, is impacted by the price, what you said, but it's also impacted by the price of the inputs. That is, the labor or the capital, things that go into producing, the good that you're looking at here. So an increase or decrease in these price inputs is going to impact it. If they increase, well, it's going to make you less profitable now. It's costing more to produce good. So it's going to shift the supply curve to the left, and it's going to decrease supply. But if these goods become, these inputs become cheaper, well, it's going to increase profits, and you're going to be more likely to produce it. That's going to increase supply. Technological improvements, of course, this is a big thing, obviously, because, as technology improves, like for producing whatever good you're looking at, you're going to be able to produce it more of them now from the same amount of inputs. And so it's going to make you more, productive, and you can produce goods cheaper. And because that's going to increase profits and you'll increase the supply of it. Right? So usually technology improvements are always increasing. Sometimes you can have it where sometimes technology decreases. If you're looking at an economy as a whole, but if you're looking at one particular market, technology is usually constantly like slowly increasing. And that's going to make it cheaper to produce the good and thus increase supply. Entry or exit of other sellers. Obviously, if more sellers enter, well, that's going to increase the supply. If they're exiting, well, it's more than likely going to decrease supply, but it's going to shift it to the left. You'll see a decreased supply of the good. Supply disruptions. Well, you saw this like right when we got out of COVID. Our just-in-time supply chain stuff, it really got disrupted. And so that caused a decreased supply for a lot of goods here. It took us a while to get back going, like after trying to get back out of COVID. That's a good example of supply disruption that took place. Regulatory costs, regulations are a big thing. If something takes place that some big regulation where it requires, maybe you have to hire more accountants or more lawyers to make sure you're got everything in place. Well, it's going to make it more expensive. Well, it's going to decrease supply. But if somebody comes in and they cut a lot of regulation, it's going to have the opposite effect. It's going to make it cheaper to produce the good. Now you have less regulatory burden. And, it'll increase the supply of the good. What about expected future price increases? We'll just look at if there's expected future price increase. We'll look at oil as a good example. All right. So if oil is expected to go up in the future, well, what's going to happen is people that produce oil, they're going to hold it in inventory. So they're going to, take it off the market. What this will do, this will decrease supply for the current period. And what they're doing, they're holding on to it, and they're going to wait till later on when prices increases, then put it back on the market so they can sell it for a higher price. Okay. So an expected future price increase will actually decrease it. All right. Taxes, of course, is going to affect it. Like, you get some sort of tax benefit. Like say if you're producing some sort of car or some kind of energy efficient or using some kind of clean energy, you might get some kind of tax benefit for doing it. Also, that'll increase the production of that good, increase the supply of it. All right. So here's an example. Stuff that's going on, let's look at the equilibrium market price of gasoline here. We're putting these together. So I'll just talk about this first part. So in April through July 2008, the price of gasoline skyrocketed from $3 a gallon to $4.10. But at the same time, the consumer demand shrank from 16 gallons a week to 11.5 gallons. All right. So resource scarcity was a likely explanation. So let's draw on use our diagram, supply and demand, and kind of explain what's going on here. Okay. Right. Okay. So we're looking at the market for gasoline. All right. So on the y-axis, this is our price level. This price per gallon. On the x-axis, this is our quantity. This is gallons per week. Okay. Is what it's measured in. All right. Remember, our supply curve is upward sloping. Our demand curve is downward sloping. And where these intersect is where it's in equilibrium. We're starting out, it says, it was at $3 a gallon to start out with. And when it was $3 a gallon, consumers on average were buying 16 gallons a week. 16 gallons per week. Okay. What happened? The price shot up. All right. At the same time it shot up, consumer demand, shrank. It decreased. All right. So what this means is there obviously was some sort of supply disruption here, right? There was a decrease in supply. Right. So supply of oil production decreased. Okay. Now, how do we know that? Because, well, using this diagram, like we could just see using it, because we know that the price went up. It went up to $4.10. And the amount of consumer spent each week went from 16 gallons a week to 11.5 gallons per week. All right. So what happened? You have this decrease in supply. Right. So whoever's selling gasoline, well, we got less of it now. It's still selling out really fast. So let's increase the price. And when they increase the price, sellers increase price. Well, that caused a movement up the demand curve and led to a decrease of quantity demand, and the new equilibrium was at 11.5 a week. All right. Okay. I guess to reiterate this again, there is a decrease in oil production. So let's shift supply to the left. This causes an increase in the price and a decrease in, the equilibrium quantity. All right. Let's go back to our slides here. All right, so I won't go over this too much, but you can look at this and it kind of explains what's going on when the price went up and it went down, like shows how this impacted the demand for smart car, these little smart car minis, these little small cars that you got really good gas mileage, right? And you can see the effect of it, how it impacted it. All right, so talking about these demand relationships. So each consumer, they need to choose among the different combinations like goods and services that whatever is going to satisfy the utility is going to increase the utility the most here. Right? And it's subject to the constraint of the amount of money they have available, their income that they have. It's the two biggest reasons for these change in quantity demand when you see these changes in price. Well, the first is the purchasing power. Well, if the price of the good goes up, your income's the same. Well, it's not possible to buy more of it. Okay, so it's going to decrease your purchasing power. Because of that, the quantity demand is going to decrease. The other thing is substitution effects. All right. So if the price of one good goes up, if there's something else that you can buy that's similar to it, well, no, you'll go to it instead. So like you're not going to buy it, that'll decrease. You'll see the decrease in quantity demand for it as a result of that. Like you'll substitute away to some other good that's price that hasn't went up or it's cheaper. So those are the two biggest things that it's talking about, like when you're just looking at when you see a change in the price level, how this affects quantity demand. All right. Now going from there, this is related to it. This is look at this concept. It's called elasticity. And this is basically talking about how buyers and sellers, how sensitive are they to any sort of change in the price level of a good. All right. That is, if the price level changes, how would it affect their quantity demanded or the quantity supplied of the good. Okay. And the measurement and the way we measure this responsiveness is like we call it elasticity. And so it's just the ratio of the percentage change in the quantity, the percentage change in the determinant here. So all other things remain the same. So it's what sort of percentage change in price. What kind of impact will that have on the percentage change in the quantity demanded or supplied of this good? All right. So I'll probably put all these out as well. Let's see. All right. So here's the formula for the price elasticity of demand. We'll look at demand here. And so this, like I said, this is the ratio of the percentage change in quantity from a percentage change in price here. This will give us our elasticity of demand. Let me go to a little whiteboard thing here. I'll draw this out. Okay. All right, let's erase this first. So we're looking at, like we said, elasticity of demand. Right. And so what is elasticity of demand? Well, it's, what percent change in quantity demanded of a good takes place if there's based on what percent change in price of this good here. And this will measure the responses of the change in demand, quantity demanded to it, change in price here. All right, so what is the percent change in quantity? Well, that's just, this is just the change in quantity. Oh, let me write this out better. I'll go to the in-between formula here. All right, so the percent change in quantity demand. What is this? Well, this is just the new quantity demanded. You want to subtract the old quantity demanded from it, and then divide by the old quantity demand. And so that'll give you the percent change in quantity demand. All right, what about price? Well, that's just all right. This is just the new price. And you subtract from it with the old price. And to get the percent change in price, you want to divide by the old price. Okay. Now, another way to do this, to determine this, is just use the change in quantity demanded divided by the change in price multiplied by the price divided by the quantity. All right, that'll give it to you this as well. All right, and so like we said, the change of quantity here, this is just the change of quantity demanded. And this is just the change in price. Okay, so that's our formula. Like I said, when we meet in class, like I'll try to go over some of this stuff, go over some problems, go into more detail. This is kind of like, these lectures just kind of get familiar with the ideas. And if you have any questions on this, that's a big thing. Make sure, like, because some people went over this, they know it really well. It's just kind of a review, but some people may not have as much economic background, right? And that's what, email me questions, have questions in class, like be sure to ask when we meet up in person. That's when you can do a lot more of this. So let's go back to our slides. All right. So let's talk about these different terms. Well, the first thing to know that elasticity for demand is always negative. If there's an increase in price, well, there's always going to be a decrease in the quantity demand. So we know that since they have like a negative relationship, well, the elasticity of demand is always negative. Okay. Either that or, it could be zero if it's perfectly inelastic. So let's go over these different terms. So perfectly inelastic is when the quantity demand, it doesn't change no matter what the price is. There's a little diagram here that kind of explains it here. This is, as you see, if this price per unit moves up or down, well, quantity demand stays the same. It doesn't change at all. So a good example of a good like this would be like the EpiPen, something that you need, a necessity, right? Something that's life-saving or you have to have, like whatever the price you're going to be willing to pay it. Right? So it has a very inelastic demand. It's perfectly inelastic. Now, regular inelastic, this is when the absolute value of elasticity of demand is between 0 and 1. Right? So it's going to change some, but it's not going to be really responsive to it. It's when it's less than 1. Okay. Well, what if it's 1? Well, then it's called unique elastic. Right? So if you have a 10% change in the price level, well, there's going to be a 10% change in the quantity demanded. Right? Those changes are going to be identical. That's when you get a unit elastic. All right, then when you get to elastic, this is when quantity demand is really responsive to change in prices. There's going to be a significant change here. And so that's when the absolute value of elasticity demand is greater than 1. Okay. Now, what about if it's all the way and if it's infinitely perfect? And it's called perfectly elastic. Let's look at that. And it's going to be horizontal here. So this is what's known as a price taker. Right? The price is going to change. It doesn't matter how much, what happens to quantity demanded or how much the goods introduced to the market. It's always going to be the same. It's always going to be the same price. So a good example of these would be like commodity goods. Those are like really the only examples, like corn. Some of these big commodity goods, corn, wheat. Okay, like they're known as what's known as price takers. They have perfectly inelastic demand. Where the prices, that's what you get for them. Okay, so these are the two extremes, like we said, and the things that are in between are here. Inelastic, there's a response to price changes, but it's not really significant. But elastic, it's fairly significant. And so how this relates to managers, well, you really need to know where, you know, what's going on with your product. Is it at its current price and level? Is it, is demand for it, is it inelastic or is it going to be elastic? Right. So, you want, they want to try to increase sales revenue by, using part of your budget for price promotions, advertising, and different things. But if where your price is inelastic, where the current price is, where the demand is for, well, you want to raise prices, because if you do that, it's not going to decrease quantity demanded that much, and at the same time, you're going to generate more revenue from it because of the higher increase in price. All right. Now, obviously, if it's an inelastic range, you don't want to lower price because you're not going to sell it anymore, and you're getting less for them. So it doesn't make any sense. Whereas if you're somewhere that's really elastic, and if you realize, like, okay, if I adjust the price, you're going to see these significant changes. Well, it might be the case. Well, maybe you do want to lower the price some. You lower the price a little bit, and you sell a lot more of it. So that that makes up for the fact that you're getting a smaller amount for it. You're getting a lower amount of revenue for each unit here. Right? So being aware of this and how this works is really important for a manager, like when they're trying to determine, what they want to do, either raise or lower prices. All right. So here's an example. You had a demand shift. So previously, elasticity here, like for this Beetle, VW here, $9,500 for each one. This is in 2012. The quantities in thousands of autos sold. Is it unit elastic? Okay. All right. But for whatever reason, there was an increase in demand. And because of that, this price here led to it, the elasticity being greater than -1. That means it was, really elastic. So it makes sense here to increase the price. Whereas before, maybe it didn't make sense. That's another thing to keep in mind when you're on these demand curves. Wherever you're at, that makes a difference. Right? If you're on a lower part of it, elasticity is really elastic. Right? So here you want to, be conscious of raising the price too much, because it's going to really decrease, decrease the amount of goods it's sold, because it's really elastic. But as you go up, it goes to unit elastic, and then it becomes inelastic as you keep raising prices further and further. So being aware where you're at on your curve is really important here. Right? And here, first, maybe it didn't make sense to do much of the price, but you had this, some demand shift for whatever reason, increase the demand. And if you kept it at 9,500, right, demand's really, inelastic here. So maybe it makes sense here to, since it's really elastic, maybe to lower the price. You could sell a lot more of them. All right. It depends on how much you made on each VW though. I'm not sure the margins they had for how much profit for each one of them here. But it might make sense at this point. Well, now I can really increase the sales by lowering the prices a little bit. So maybe it makes sense then. Okay. All right. So some of the factors that go into affecting the elasticity of demand, it varies among different products. So one of the things that affects it is if there's a close substitute. Right? So if there's something that you can, replace it with easily, like Coke and Pepsi, good substitutes. If the price of Coke went up too much, well, people are like, well, I like it better, but it's not too much difference from Pepsi. Well, I'm going to switch to Pepsi. I'll substitute away from it to Pepsi. Right? So that's going to be a big, impact of it. So it's going to make it. So if there's more close substitutes are, the more elastic demand is for a good here. So the demand for Coke is going to be pretty elastic because you got a good substitute with Pepsi. The percentage of consumers' budget is going to impact it as well. So if it's only a small portion of your budget, well, if the price goes up, you may not even be noticing that much. So you may not, the elasticity of it is going to be, pretty inelastic. It's not going to change as much. if it's a small part of it. But if it's a big part of your budget, well, you're gonna see a significant change here. It's gonna be really elastic. You're gonna be sensitive to any sort of price change because it makes up such a big part of your budget. Right. Now, position is income superior. I looked at this. I'm really not sure what this. So, somebody remind me when we get to class because I'm going to ask somebody about if they know what exactly this means. Like, because I looked in the book, it seems like it's talking about maybe if a good's inferior or normal, but I'm not sure. Yeah. The time period of adjustment makes a difference here. The classic example they give for this always is like, gas. If gas goes up, well, you still got to buy it to get where you're going. You can't adjust really quickly in the short run. So it's not going to make too big of an impact on the demand. It's going to be inelastic in the short run. But in the long run, if the price stays up, well, people are going to adjust. They may buy a car that gets better gas mileage. They may move closer to their work. And as a result, then this is showing how the price elasticity in the long run is elastic, but in the short run, it's inelastic. Okay. And that's what it's talking about when it's looking at the time period of adjustment. All right, so here's some list of examples of different goods. And what really makes a difference is whether they're considered necessities or like luxury goods. So let's look at one necessity, telephones. All right. So since they have to, everybody has to have a telephone, you can't function without it. It's pretty much considered a necessity. So, if there's an increase in price, you're not going to be you're still going to buy, another phone. You're still going to buy a phone regardless if the price goes up. No, you're not going to be very sensitive to it. As you can see, there's only a very small change in quantity demanded when you see a price change here. Whereas something like, bedroom furniture, people are really sensitive to that because, who really needs that box, that headset, and you just put the mattress on the floor or whatever. But also people don't consider this a necessity. Like you can do without it, or you can just keep what you have a long time, not replace it. So people are going to be really sensitive to price changes with bedroom furniture because it's not a necessity, right? Versus your phone where you really need it. Some other examples. Beer, wine, and liquor. It's weird that beer is more sensitive to price changes than wine. I figured it'd be the other way around, but I guess not. But they're still inelastic because they're less than one. So it means people they really need their alcohol pretty much here. But not as much as coffee. Coffee obviously is it's even more inelastic, so it's even more necessary. Whereas a lot of times people only drink on the weekends. Like coffee, you need that every day. So people aren't going to be quite as sensitive. They're going to be really sensitive. Not sensitive to price changes because they need to buy it. The demand's really inelastic. Okay. Any other thing that sticks out? You see tobacco products. They're inelastic. They're considered a necessity, not a luxury. What are some luxury goods? What's interesting here, dental visits. This is a good little comparison. As you can see, for adult male and females, it's a necessity because it's inelastic. But with children, it's really sensitive to price changes. And why is that? Well, it's a kid, do they really need it? Because their teeth are going to fall out anyway. So maybe just don't even bother going to the dentist. So you can see that makes a big difference here. It's considered maybe a luxury for children, but a necessity for adults because those are the only teeth you got. If you mess them up or lose them, they're gone. Whereas children, it's nice that their teeth are cleaner, but they're going to fall out anyway. All right. Let's see. Okay, other things we could look at. Income inelasticity. That is, how sensitive is quantity demanded to changes in your income? Now, you're going to think, well, your income goes up, well, you're automatically going to buy more of a good. Your quantity demand is going to increase. Not necessarily so. Now, if it's a normal good, yeah, it's going to be positive. You're going to see an increase of quantity demand when you get more money because I got more money now, I'll buy more of it. But some goods, it's not the case. Some goods have a negative inelasticity when you have an increase in income. You have an increase in income, you buy less of it. And we call these goods inferior because you're only buying them because you don't have enough money. You don't make as much money as you like. So like, ramen noodles are one thing like that you buy in the bag. Those, that's something that's really cheap that you buy when you're college, when you get out of college and you have a larger income coming in. Well, you buy something else in place of them. All right. Another example would be like these off-brand sodas. Like if like your income's fairly low, you just started working, you're just out, like maybe you buy those, but like once you get a raise and start getting more income in, then you buy Coke or Pepsi. Right, so you increase your Coke and Pepsi consumption, but you decrease, your off-brand consumption, like Sam's Cola and some of the Rite Aid, some of these other off-brands. Right, that's because they're inferior goods. You're only consuming them because you make as money as you like. Cross price elasticity. This is talking about like how does quantity demand change? How sensitive is it to changes in prices of other goods that are related to it? Right. So good A, this is the good we're looking at. How does its quantity demand changes based off a price change in good B? All right. Now, whether this is positive or negative will determine whether it's what's known as a complement or a substitute. All right. So if you see a positive increase in good B and you see a positive increase in good A, well, that means it's a substitute. They're substitutes for one another. All right. Let's say B is Pepsi, A is Coke. Price of Pepsi goes up. Okay, well, you're going to substitute away to Coke now. You're going to buy more of it. So you're going to see an increase in quantity demand for it. All right. Now, what if it's a complement? Okay, so let's look at, chips and salsa. Salsa would be good B. Chips is good A. If the price of salsa goes up, or dip or whatever you want to do, if it goes up, well, you're going to buy less of it because it costs more. And as a result of that, since it goes with these chips, you eat these chips to go along with it. Well, you're going to see a decrease in the quantity demand of chips here. So this is going to be negative. Okay. So depending on whether they're complements or substitutes, it's going to show whether, this is going to be either be positive if they're substitutes, negative if they're complements. Okay. And this is how we determine, like, some things you can kind of figure out, like chips and dip. It's like, yeah, they're going to be complements. But some things you're not really sure at. And the way you do that is by looking at data and doing this, taking the cross price elasticity. And if it's negative, they're complements. If it's positive, they're substitutes. So obviously it's something, if you're a manager, you need to keep in mind. You got to keep in mind of other goods that are related to yours, how the prices of them is something you always need to keep in mind as well. How prices are going on with that. And so now we'll go to this last part of this. What's known as marginal analysis. This is really important, like to determine, like, to maximize a profit. This is any business owner, any manager. This is something you got to keep in mind when you're making decisions on how much to produce of a good here, right? Because you don't look at total profit, or if you have a negative or positive, you don't look at that. What you want to do is you want to look at the marginal profit. That is the increase or decrease in profit, like from a marginal increase of production of the good here. All right. So let's look at an example here to kind of explain this, why this is important. So in 2005, Memorial Hospital, the CEO was looking at, performance review. And as part of the review, the chief of obstetrics proposed increasing the number of babies being delivered in his department. So CEO, he looked at the financial statements and he saw that, the cost of each delivery was $5,000, but the average revenue was only $4,300. So he's thinking, well, why do I want to increase more? We're losing on each of it. Well, here he fell for what's called the fixed cost fallacy. A large part of the cost for this was fixed. It had nothing to do with it adding additional deliveries here. All right. And so if you take a closer look, and if you looked at it like, okay, looked at it on the margin saying, okay, well, how much does each additional one cost? Well, then we found out that each additional marginal cost of each delivery is only $3,000. So they would do one more delivery. Well, it costs $3,000, but the revenue would be $4,300. All right. So there would be a positive profit on, there would be a marginal profit of each additional delivery here. That's why they were saying they needed to try to like increase the amount of babies here. I guess there's a lot of money keeping what they had run, the rent and all that. they probably had more capacity to do this, but like they just couldn't, weren't delivering enough to like use it all. So then they would have been better off. They could like increase that. And he was, whereas the CEO wasn't really thinking on the margin, the chief of Austretics was, So let's look at a chart here to kind of like go over this. So, kind of go in a little more detail about this. So, you got to keep in mind your revenue, your cost, and your profit. And you need to also think about your total profit. But you also need to keep in mind your marginal and your average as well. Keep those all separate here. And the really important thing to remember to look at is your marginal profit, because that's going to tell you where you need to increase or decrease production of the good. All right. So here we have the number of output for a good here from 0 to 10. Total profit, marginal profit. This is the profit from producing an additional unit, and the average profit. Okay, so we start off, if we don't produce anything, there's negative $200. So that means the fixed cost here are $200. Like, it doesn't matter if you don't produce anything, you still got to pay $200. Okay. What about if you increase production by 1? Well, you see total profit now, it went from negative 200 to negative 150. So the marginal profit, that is a profit from producing this additional unit here, is $50. Right? So now your total profit is still negative, but not quite as bad. What about going from 1 to 2? Well, the total profit went from negative 150 to negative 25. So the marginal profit was 125. All right, so going from 1 to 2, there's an additional profit of 125. So this caused the total profit to go from negative 150 to negative 25. And what about the average profit? Well, whereas it went from negative 150 before, now it went to negative 12.5. How do you get that? Well, you take your total profit, negative 25, and you divide by the total number of the output, which is 2, and you get negative 12.5. So you got to keep, these are separate, the average and the marginal. The marginal is just looking at the profit from this additional unit, whereas average is looking at all the units you produce, it's taking your total profit and dividing it by the amount of production that's taking place. As you can see, as you go from 2 all the way to 9, there's a positive marginal profit. That is, for each additional unit you produce, the revenue you generate is going to be more than the cost. So it's positive. But then what happens is you go from 9 to 10, it goes to a negative marginal profit. That is, producing this 10th unit, the cost of producing it, was greater than the revenue that you generated from it. All right. And so what you want to do here, all right, well, as you can see, if you produce 10, well, it doesn't matter, my total profit is still positive. Well, that's not what you want to do. You want to maximize profits. And so the way you do this is you keep increasing production until you no longer have, a positive marginal profit. All right. So you want to stop here at 9, all right, because that's the last time that you have a positive marginal profit. As you can see, that's your highest total profit here, 1,500 here. Right. And so as anybody that's owns a business or a manager, this is what you want to try to find. You want to try to find the sweet spot here, right? Where production of that last additional unit, where the revenue you generate from it, is either positive or the same thing as a cost. All right. You don't want to keep producing where the cost is greater than the revenue from the last unit. And if the revenue generated is greater than the cost, you want to kind of keep producing until you get to that sweet spot where they're kind of like leveled out here. All right. Okay, so kind of covered a good bit of stuff. Maybe you have some questions. Be sure to, after you watch these, send me emails. Have questions ready for in class. What I'm going to do in class, I'm going to go in more detail with it. Go over some questions. Be a big part of it. I'll work through some problems. Just try to go over this stuff a little bit more detail. All right. Hopefully this helped. Bye.